Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching this. We are actually live right now on multiple platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, everywhere. So I have a really special guest today, somebody who's worked with me before on my other podcast, a man who is very seasoned, knows what he's talking about. As a matter of fact, I've got two amazing books in front of me that he has authored. Flipping Properties, Mr. Bill Bronchick, and another book that you might want to find on Amazon or his website, Financing Secrets of a Millionaire Real Estate Investor. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Mr. Bill Bronchick. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I always admire what you write, the things you talk about. And we're one of the same, as matter of fact, with the giver's gain kind of attitude, which I
Mhm.
really, really love about you, Bill. So let's talk about some of the different things that we're seeing,
Mhm.
some of the different opportunities. I'm running the Commercial Real Estate Investor Club. I've got a large following, and they're also starting to see the opportunity. And as far as you've been around the block a few
Mhm.
times,
Mhm.
this market compared to other markets you've been in, what are your thoughts?
Well, typically a real estate cycle is about 7 years, but this cycle has paused, started, paused, stopped, started for about let's see, going on about 13 years in the upward direction. In some markets of the country, in some sectors, and in some parts of cities, things have gone down a little bit, not dramatically, but a little bit. In some, it's flat, and in most, it's still on the upward direction, especially residential. In commercial office, obviously, that's taken a big hit because of COVID and because of the invention of this online streaming. And but other things like apartments are seem to be no end in sight, particularly the affordable class, the BC apartments, A apartments, A plus apartments, triple A. We've seen a lot of that building around the country, and it's a little saturated in some markets, and in other markets, it's all full. It's unbelievable. I see them building apartment after apartment after apartment. Who's going to live in these things? And they're all full. So
Yes,
you
yes.
just don't know.
Now I've got a large audience from
Mhm.
somebody who's total newbie, somebody who doesn't have a real estate license, to some people
Mhm.
that are very, very seasoned, done some
Yeah.
syndications, operated as a GP. So I've got the gamut. If somebody's just
Mhm.
starting out and seeing this opportunity in the market, would you recommend residential, multifamily? Where would be a good starting point for them?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to, especially if you're going to get into the income property business, start basic with a single family duplex, maybe three, no more than 4 units, because that's where the residential financing opportunity stops at 4 units. Once you get into 5, you're in commercial financing, and it's a little harder. So I would say you could either buy a home and rent it out, or maybe if you need a place to live and you're single, or it's just you and your spouse and your empty nesters, or just young married, no kids, just buy like a 4 unit and live in one and rent out the other three. Especially now, you can find opportunities where you can get a good discount on something that's a little dilapidated, not terribly, but needs a little love. And FHA's got these 203K investor loans where with just 3.5% down, you can buy that fourplex, and they'll lend you the money for the fix up of the fourplex as well. So you're getting in with 3.5% down on everything, which is a great way to go. You have to live in one of the units, so that's the catch. But that's a great way to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And it was one of those things that I put in my book is, start with even a single family as a house
Yeah,
hack, rent out the rooms, or like you
yeah,
said, 1 to 4 units FHA. That's perfect. So I'm glad
right.
we're on the same page. Now, parts of the country, are you seeing better opportunities than other parts of the country, and where?
Well, two types of opportunities. One is a dip, for at least the foreseeable future, and another areas where there's upside potential, even though it's flatter up already. And I'm seeing both. Real estate is local. I hate when people talk about the talking heads on like CNBC, the housing market this and the housing market that. It couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, you could talk about oil or gold or stock market like that, because it doesn't matter where you are, it's the same. But real estate is all local. So what's going on in California or New York or Florida is different things. And what's going on within us, even within a city versus another city in a state, or even within a city on the east side, the west side, the north, south, neighborhood by neighborhood, asset class by asset class, it varies. So it's really down to the micro local, where you get to know neighborhoods and buy according to what's going on in those neighborhoods or in that asset class in that area.
Perfect, Bill. Now, there's folks out there that heard of this subject to or sub to terminology. Could we dig into that, unpack it a little bit for the audience? And I'd like to talk about lease option and a few other things that you're an expert at. So maybe unpack, what is sub to?
Yeah, sub to or subject to means buying a piece of real estate without paying off the mortgage. You're taking it subject to the mortgage lien without paying it off at closing. You continue making the seller's loan payments as if you were the borrower, and you rent it out or do whatever, live in it, whatever. It's a tremendous opportunity where interest rates are, depending on how much you're putting down in your credit score, could be anywhere from 7 to 8% as an investor. If someone has an existing 3% loan and you can give them a little cash for their equity, even if they don't have a lot of it, and the seller deeds you the property and you just keep paying that 3% loan, and you can rent it out for several $100s a month cash flow, whether it be single family, a duplex, a fourplex, or even I've done this on commercial, multifamily. I've done this on self-storage. I've done this on all types of asset classes. And it's an extremely good opportunity to get into real estate without having to qualify for the loan. We're not assuming it and asking permission. We're just taking it over and making the payments. Now, in theory, every lender has the right under the mortgage agreement, if the seller transfers it to you without paying it off, to accelerate that loan balance, to basically say, force you to pay it off. But in my experience, very, very, very few times do they actually do that. There's just no incentive for a lender to force you to pay off a loan that's, quite frankly, being paid and it's current. So even though market rates are 7 or more, you can find a property 4% or 3%. 1 in every 4 loans is still under 3%, and 2 out of every 3 are under 4%. So there's a lot of properties out there with good existing loans that we can leverage their mortgage payment at a lower rate that we can rent out, because frankly, there's very few markets left where you can buy a single family home, put 20% down at 7.5% interest, and even break even on rent. It's hard.
I totally agree. Let's unpack a lease option. What is that?
A lease option is actually 2 transactions. It's a rental agreement with an option to purchase. So if you're the tenant on that side, you can lease a property to live in, let's say, and have an option to buy it if you want to buy it later on. And if you fix the price up front and it goes up in value, that's a good opportunity. You could also, as a landlord, do the same thing. You could lease it to a tenant, giving them the option to buy it from you, and you fix the price up front, except you're going to fix it a little higher, and you can get away with selling it without a real estate agent. And this is a great opportunity for the people who buy a property, fix it up with the intent to flip it, and then they end up with too much rehab. And there's no margin left because they have to list it with an agent, sell it, and they're barely break even. Instead of selling it immediately, rent it to a tenant with an option to buy for maybe 2 years and get top dollar on price, no real estate agent fee. They just added 6% to your profit. And when the tenant buys, if they buy it more than a year after you bought it, that's a different tax structure. That's a long-term capital gain rate, which caps out at 20% federal rate, where if you buy and flip a property in less than a year, then you're paying in the high 30s potentially. So it's a good strategy. You can even take it one step further and rent it as a company tenant. So you're not going to live in it, but your company will rent it from an owner with an option to buy a little bit below market. And then your company sublets it to another tenant who's going to live in it at a higher rate of rent and then sell it to them at a higher price. So when the subtenant is ready to buy from you, you buy it from the owner and basically flip it to the subtenant, and you make a spread on both the rent in the meantime and the purchase and sale price at the end. That's a really good. I got started doing that a lot. It's called a sandwich lease option. And I did a lot of those when I first got started because it doesn't require a lot of money. All you need is first and security, really, to get in. In terms of complication, most people don't use a broker or an attorney for a transaction like that because to them it seems like a lease. It's not real complex. As far as your profitability as an investor, it's really good because you're only putting up a little money and you're making a couple $100 a month plus a nice chunk of 20, 30, 40 grand at the back end. Good way to get started.
Absolutely. So let's muddy the water just a little bit more. Some people heard of this thing called novation. What is novation?
Yeah, novation is just a fancy marketing word for something that's been around forever. The word novation just means substitution of parties in a contract. So what they've done is people who promote novation are talking about basically it's a wholesale deal. So it's an old transaction where you put a property under contract with an owner for price A, and then you assign your purchase right as buyer to someone else for a fee. So let's say $10,000 or $20,000, and then that party substitutes in and buys directly from the owner. That's been around forever. Well, some people have kind of twisted this novation thing, by saying, well, in addition to that, you could list it on the multiple listing with a realtor, but you're not really the owner. You got a power of attorney from the owner to do it. And now it starts to look a little murky. It starts to look like you're a broker. Because in the end, instead of assigning your contract, you're tearing up your original contract after you find someone on the multiple listing to buy it from the original owner. So you're not anywhere even involved in the transaction enough to call yourself an investor. I think that a lot of the state regulatory agencies are getting on that to say, hey, you should have a broker's license to do that. But,
yeah,
novation is just basically it's a wholesale assignment with some bells and whistles added to it and repackaged under a new name.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you mentioned putting the property under a corporation, anything like that. Some people heard of a land trust. Why would somebody want to use a land trust? What is a land trust?
Okay, so a trust is a contract. It is not an entity like an LLC, a corporation, S corporation. You don't file it with a state. You create it on paper. It's an agreement between parties. So a basic living trust, some of you may have done for estate planning. You create a trust for yourself as beneficiary, and you're the trustee. You're the creator, the grantor, the trustee, and beneficiary. And then when you die, someone else, like your kids or family, becomes the beneficiary, and someone else steps in as trustee. That's a basic arrangement for a living trust, and it's all done on paper. Signed, notarized, no filing fees, no tax ID number, nothing. A land trust is really just a kind of simplified version of that, where we're creating this paper trust to hold title to one piece of property. And the reason we do that is mainly anonymity, because if you use your living trust and you call it Joe Mendoza Family Trust, everybody knows who Joe Mendoza's connection is to that trust, right? It's no surprise. But if we just called it 123 Maple Avenue Trust, who's going to know what Joe's connection is? Now, Joe could be the beneficiary, or we can combine it with an LLC and have the LLC be the beneficiary. And then instead of Joe being the trustee, someone Joe trusts, family member or friend with a different last name. Then you can go in there, deal with tenants and say, hey, I'm not the owner. If they look it up, it's a trust. There's no place publicly to look up the trust ownership. So, and the trustee is not you, so there's nowhere to go for information. And that's a good thing when you, especially if you want to remain anonymous. Like I have property managers that handle my properties. I don't want any connection to my properties. I don't want tenants contacting me. I don't want them to know who owns it. Same thing with code enforcement. When they hand out fines and violations, I don't want them to know, that I'm the man behind the green curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz. So that's the main purpose we do it. And it's not in it's not instead of an LLC, it's layering. So we put it in a trust for anonymity, and then the beneficiary for protection is the LLC.
Got it. Got it. Appreciate you going there because there's some folks talking about it. I don't know if you're a big fan of, hey, let's set up a holding entity and let's put it in Wyoming,
Right.
Delaware, Las
Mhm.
Vegas.
Yeah.
Maybe unpack that one a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. People who have lots of properties do that. If you only have a couple of properties in one state, you're probably going to form an LLC in that state. But let's say you have 2 properties in Florida, and you have 3 properties in North Carolina, and 4 properties in Arizona. So you'd probably have a Florida LLC. What did I say? Arizona LLC and North Carolina LLC, each to own the groups of properties. Then, if you wanted to take it one step further, you would create a holding company, also known as a parent company, that would own all 3 of those LLCs. And that would be formed in Wyoming, Delaware, Nevada, and a few others. I like Wyoming because it's cheap. Nevada is very expensive. And there's too much information they ask for online that's publicly available. So I don't like Nevada. Delaware is really good. I use Delaware personally, and I've been in litigation where it held up very well. Wyoming statute is pretty close, but it's also a little cheaper in Wyoming, but not substantially. We're talking about the difference between, $50 to $100 a year versus $200 or $300 a year. Nevada is 500 plus. So I just don't like Nevada for that. If you live in Nevada, well, then yeah, you do it there. But otherwise, I wouldn't do it in Nevada. I do Delaware or Wyoming. And so what you have is a parent company. Think General Motors. That's the parent company. And the subsidiaries like Chevy, Buick, Cadillac, those are your Florida, North Carolina, Arizona entities that are wholly owned by the parent company out of Delaware or Wyoming.
I love it. I love it. Way to unpack that one. Now, there's commercial brokers out there, and I'm, a big fan of commercial real estate at this point. And some of them say, man, doing a subject to lease option, totally illegal. And for me, sitting on the other side of the phone, I'm just saying, like, man, these guys just don't understand. What would you share to these folks out there, these brokers, these agents that are saying those kind of things?
Well, if someone says that's illegal, I ask them a very simple question: what law am I breaking? And they can't cite you anything because there is no law. It's something they heard through the grapevine, or they heard it at a continuing ed seminar, or they heard it from their managing broker in their office. Don't do this. It's illegal. It's immoral. And it's like the game of telephone. The story changes from I don't recommend to it's flatly illegal. You're going to jail. It's not illegal. There's no law against it. Or any of those types of transactions. They're just types of things that, and it's surprising to hear commercial real estate brokers say that, because in commercial real estate, it's much more common than in residential. 19 out of 20 brokers couldn't tell you the first thing about creative real estate financing. In commercial, I found maybe a third of brokers are really savvy and hip to this, much more so than residential.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Now, wholesaling, let's talk a little bit about that. For somebody who is unlicensed, I'm not sure which states are saying it's illegal at this point. Maybe we could touch up a little
Yeah.
bit for the potential wholesalers out there. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, wholesaling, the concept of buy low, sell low, i.e. buy low from a homeowner, sell to another investor, that's not illegal anywhere. About 3 states that off the top of my head, I'm thinking Illinois, Oklahoma, and I can't remember the third, who had passed or was about to pass it, say that not if you wholesale, but if you put a contract with an owner and then assign it to a third party, like I described earlier, that type of wholesaling requires a real estate license if you do more than one a year. So my attitude is like, look, if you're going to do this a lot, that's a good thing, because most people won't bother getting their license. They think it's too much trouble and they'll give up and go out of the business. You get your real estate license, which is not hard, as you know, to do. Very easy to get your real estate license, and then you get it and then continue doing business. You just weed out 90% of your competition who's unwilling to go, the extra mile and be serious about it. So I don't think it's a bad thing. If anything, it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Now, to help you out a little bit, There's divorce attorneys, there's probate attorneys, there's
Mhm.
contract attorneys. If somebody's to reach out to you, what would be your like perfect ideal client? What's your sweet spot?
Pays a lot up front.
I was going to say, aside from that,
Aside from that, I'm mostly a transactional
I'm
attorney,
glad
so
you're
I
honest,
do,
by the way.
yeah, I do about 60% of my business is real estate transactions. So whether it be a residential, commercial, multifamily, whatever type of transaction that they're trying to do something out of the box, I'm the guy. And about the other 40%, I do corporate entity structuring and tax planning, some of the things we discussed, like trusts and LLCs. And then the last 20% or so is estate planning. And usually those go hand in hand, the latter two, setting up the parent company and the subsidiaries, and then your living trust and your will and all that stuff together is something I usually do. And most of my clients are either real estate investors, small business owners, or entrepreneurs that don't have a typical setup.
Got it. Perfect, Bill. Now, if I were in California, I have a large part of my audience in California.
Uh-huh.
Could you still do these different things you just mentioned?
I'll give you the lawyer answer. It depends. Um, I can't represent people in transactions in California because I'm not licensed there. However, I can consult on a deal. So if someone wanted to pay for an hour of my time, which is frankly the worst use of my time, it's $4.75 an hour, but still, some people think that's a lot, but it's still, I don't care if it's $4.75 or $47.50. Trading hours for dollars is not a good use of your time and your efforts. So I do that with people who say, hey, I kind of have a fuzzy idea what I need to do and I need to nail it down. I need to bounce it off someone. I do that type of thing for people out of my state.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Good. Anything else that you wanted to add today? I mean, this was jam packed, ladies
Thank
and
you.
gentlemen. Hopefully, you took a bunch of notes. Like I said, I've got both of his books right here. Bill's been on my other show a while back, many years
Yeah.
ago. I trust him. I send him a lot of referrals. Anything else you wanted to add, Bill?
Yeah, I have 4 more books, by the way. You'll find them on Amazon or on my website at legalwiz.com. That's LEGALWIZ. I would like, for those of you who are getting started and sitting on the sidelines waiting for all the stars to be in alignment, it's not when you enter the market. It's not the timing of the market. It's how long you've been in the market that counts. Because things do go up and down, and everyone's looking for the perfect rock bottom to buy when interest rates are 1%. It's never going to happen. If you sat around the sidelines in the early 70s, when the interest rates were just like they are now, they were like 7.5%, and you waited for interest rates to drop, you would have waited about 20 years. And in that time, things went up in value 4 to 5 times. So it's not, it's almost like dollar cost averaging. You obviously, we want to get a good deal going in. We want to time the market best we can, but it's not a perfect system. They don't ring a bell at the top and the bottom. So just get a good deal, no matter what market you're in, that makes sense, that can cash flow or at least break even, and stick with it for the long term, and you will get rich in real estate.
Love it. Love it. That's what I say, guys. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. So
That's right.
that just sums it up there, Bill.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure.
Did you want to put your contact information? Do you want to share it? I'll put it on our thread either way.
Yeah, just you can drop on my website, which is legalwiz.com. And my law firm website, if you want to consult or if you're in my state, Colorado, you want to hire me, is Bronchick, my last name, Bronchick, LAWlaw.com.
Beautiful. Thanks again, Bill, for being on the show, reconnecting, and definitely we will see you again soon.
All right, pleasure.